for thanks for joining me tonight. So what we're gonna do is we're in the middle of this Bible in a year journey, and we happen to be at a point where the end of Exodus has been up, where with a lot of talk about how to build the tabernacle, and that means things like how long it's supposed to be exactly, what the curtains are supposed to be made of, how you're supposed to make them. And then we moved into Leviticus, and Leviticus is just an entire book of how to do this, how to do that, and it details the whole sacrificial system and all of the festivals and who does this and when and how it works and all of that, just one at a time, really, really detailed. So when we start to talk about all of these weights and measures and these incredibly detailed instructions about, there's food laws, there's how you dress, there's holy living, and there's everything else. It contains kind of all aspects of life, and they drive us crazy, right? We go a little cross-eyed because we keep reading these things and we're going, what? Why do I keep reading this? You zone out for a little and you come back and it feels like you're still in the exact same spot because it's just over and over and over. So let me shut that, please. Okay, that's better, right? So the first question that we come with is, what's our real problem with this? So you have a couple of questions here. So what's the real problem? Is this also overwhelming and obsessive, or is it just boring and irrelevant, right? Or is it all of the above? Or is there some kind of meaning to it? Is there some kind of meaning? Is it valuable to us? We have all of these questions. So this week we're going to dig in a little, and we're going to ask two big questions: why they're here, why they're there at all, and then the next one is why we care. So this is a message I've told you before. They matter a great deal to me. So in this message, where I'm gonna talk about how important they are, and that's actually where we're gonna get to, but how important they are, and in asking why I care, I'm implying that I do care, that we should care. But before we get into any conversation on anything like this, it has to be said, we are not under these laws anymore. Hi there. Julia Torres just said hello, and hello back. This is going to be one of those things too. One of the coolest things about streaming like this is that I can see. So if there's any kind of questions or and Susan, hello. If there's any kind of back and forth, if there's a question or anything like that, just reach out. I can see it, so it's kind of fun. I don't know that I can see all of them, but I can see some of them. So we're not under these laws or regulations anymore. Okay, we are not under those. So what we find in the New Testament is, say, in Mark 7:18 and 19, Jesus says, "Don't you see that nothing that enters a person from the outside can defile them? For it doesn't go into their heart, but into their stomach, and then out of the body." In saying this, Jesus declared all foods clean. This, we've talked before about clicks. The thing is, it's back here and it moves in little. If we're starting here and we end up here, to take that huge step is just too much for us. We can't process that, and we can't move into that. We get confused, and then we go in little clicks at a time. And that's how the Bible moves us through things. So this is a click from physical and outer purity, which is what the Old Testament really is, to moral and inner purity, which is what the New Testament is. Okay, that's how things start to move. Okay, and in Acts 10, Peter has this vision where he says, where he hears, "What God has made clean, you must not call profane." There's a sheet that comes down of all the foods that they weren't allowed to eat before, and they say you can eat everything, right? So, and then in Romans and 1 Corinthians, Paul argues food doesn't make a person spiritually unclean. Okay, that's one. Two, we have freedom regarding food and everything else when he says things like everything is permissible, right? And number three, they should avoid causing anybody to stumble. Now, those things are kind of loaded because all the things that were set up in the Old Testament about things, steps that you had to follow, were kind of fulfilled. See, we can't ever forget that so much of the law, so much of the Old Testament was set up, it's meant to show us that we can't keep it. Okay? There's 613 laws, and really there's 613 to show us that we can't keep 613 laws. Okay? Even the first 10, we have really a lot of trouble keeping the first one. Right? So you have all of these things. The scriptures and our lives are full of us breaking these incredibly detailed rules. And in some cases, they're spectacular. They're immediate and they're spectacularly, right? And then you can think of the one with Aaron's sons. Aaron's sons, they go in and they there's a misstep and they're killed on the spot. Right, their lives are taken. So the food laws, we don't forget, the food laws and the Torah are no longer binding under the new covenant. Okay, new covenant is just a way to say new testament, new promise, new creation, really. Right, the law is fulfilled by Jesus, and that's what Jesus himself said. So now it's much more dependent on wisdom than concrete specifications, right? We are released to love, to follow the Spirit, and to become as we are each wonderfully made. The gospel and grace give us a new kind of freedom. It's a freedom from the law, but it's also a freedom to, and we kind of forget that one. It releases us from any kind of obligation, and it allows us the freedom to do the things that we're made to do, which is love each other. And it's kind of like that thing, it goes from being a have to a get to, right? And here's the perfect example for it. We don't have to keep a 10% tithe anymore, right? When sometimes you ask that, do I have to tithe 10% of my income? Well, no. You can give more. Right? So that's the thing. It releases us from that obligation, and it gives us all kinds of freedom to do the thing. Right? So that's how that works. That has to be said before we talk any kind of talk about works or rules or Old Testament stuff. That we have to see, because we have a different context for things, right? But there are so many things to learn from and through this, what I'll call divine intentionality. And before we really get started, you need to know it's not specifics, because if you think that I care about cubits, you're mistaken. Or what toe the blood from the sacrifice goes on. I don't care about those things at all. And if you're wondering, it's the right big toe. That's what it is. But I don't care about that. Instead, it's about principles. Right? It's about ways to live and to be human. So now let's get into this. The first question that all biblical conversations begin with context. These are written by real people in a real place in a real time. Okay? This is not just pulled out of thin air. This was given to people at a particular time. Okay? And ancient, Near Eastern legal and ritual texts looked exactly like this. They used formulaic repetition, technical specificity, and structured patterns. Instead of tedious, like we hear them, ancient hearers would see this repetition as emphasis. Okay? So this kind of literature, this kind of document is totally normal for serious religious and legal writing. And when you start to say things like legal, you kind of go, what are we talking about with that? This is a covenant, and a covenant is just another way to say a binding agreement, right? It's a formal binding agreement. This is exactly how it had to look. This wouldn't have been, it's surprising to us now. But to them, it was exactly how these things worked. Okay? And it signaled authority and stability. That's what agreements like this look like. So, now, once we deal with the contextual things, we can start to move into the specific whys that we came for, that we are looking for here, okay? And the first one is, why are they there? Okay, from a historical standpoint, in addition to being absolutely normal for the day, the detail serves multiple purposes at once. It conveys authority and order. Okay, that's one. Number two, it gives us a practical direction. Number three, it shapes communal identity. We'll get into all these then too, so you don't have to worry too much about this. Four, it illustrates theology. And what I mean by that is it shows us a God who's intensely involved in concrete life. Okay, those are the points. And now let's discuss this a little bit more in depth. Number one, the food laws are or were hygienic and practical. This is the one that I really loved in the very, very beginning once I first started to write this, because it allows an easier path in to see some kind of point to all of this, okay? And it does give us, they are hygienic and they are practical. You see, pigs carry parasites, right? Especially when meat is undercooked. And that was much more likely then and there. Pigs spoil quickly in hot places without refrigeration. This was a hot place without refrigeration. Shellfish, without knowledge of bacteria and toxins, are really risky. Okay? So a simpler food classification, including things like complete prohibition and impermissibility, like where you can't eat any of this. Okay? That reduces any kind of mistake that could happen in the food preparation. See, less people get sick, less people die, right? And as far as touching unclean things, dead things can carry disease, right? Avoiding them just reduces the risk of infection. And skin diseases also can be highly contagious and deadly without any kind of modern treatment. You see how some of these things can be kind of practical? Instead of giving us a list of what we can eat, how to make it, or anything like that. It's just don't do this, don't eat this, all of that. So this is just a few examples. It's not all of them, and that should probably, hopefully that makes a little bit of sense, right? So there is a practical reason for most of this stuff. But it's not the primary reason. And if it was, there would be more and other foods discussed here. So it is a primary, it is our way in, and it's an easy surface level way that we can see, oh, maybe there's something going on here more than just bullet point laws, right? There might be some reason behind these. It's a nice entrance point. Number two, the Torah, these instructions, the mitzvot, which is that 613 group of 613 things, and these ways of life are absolutely cultural and they're identity based. See, God at that point was creating a people, a nation of his own, okay? And he wanted them to be set apart from everybody else. The easiest example for that is circumcision. Right? What he wanted was somebody that was different, that was set apart, okay, that you could tell. That's true for us too. That's true for us. We're supposed to look and feel and be different from the culture, right? Yesterday we talked about hate for hate and using the enemy's tools and things like that. If two of us are punching each other, it doesn't matter who's right. There's still two people punching each other. We are not supposed to be the culture. Nobody should have to guess, right? Nobody should have to be asked. That's part of the thing here. That's part of the meaning behind this. God wanted a people who were set apart, that people would notice as being different. That hasn't changed, okay? But back then, this Torah, this covenant, this relationship was about maintaining cultural identity. It was about distinguishing Israel from the neighbors, right? From all of those other neighbors that were around them. and creating a shared national practice. And that what I mean by that is when a whole society, when a whole group of people uses the same measurements, the same rituals, does the same things, that reinforces unity. It just does. There's something really, really cool about every Catholic everywhere getting the same message, the same verses, the same service today, right? There's something about that that makes you feel connected, right? And to make it a little bit more understandable, the Super Bowl. When everybody's watching the same thing at the same time, it feels like you're connected to something. Everybody goes in the next day and talks about the commercials or maybe who won the game. But that's the thing, that when we're all doing the same thing at the same time, there's a greater cohesive effect that we all feel connected a little bit. COVID, we were all experiencing the exact same thing at the exact same time, and we were all in the middle of that. Now, how we got so divided in that, I don't know. But we were all connected in the fear of the pandemic, or the challenge of the pandemic. Okay, that leads us to number 3, which is theology. And that is the primary purpose of the food laws. It's not about hygiene, it's not about practicality, and it's not even about separation. It was a religious identity. They and we are in him. See, that's what this is all about. It's a religious identity, and it's about holiness. And let's break these couple things down. Our identity is that of children of this God, this Creator, this Savior. He's the number one. Okay? Now, these laws give us a way to practice daily holiness. It's a constant reminder of, number one, who we are following, who we are worshiping, who's making these rules, and 2, how to do the stuff, how to do these things. They give us a discipline. They give us discipline that sanctifies ordinary life. And when I say that, I even mean eating and business and everything, what we wear, what we touch, all of how we make our food, right? All of that. And in that, it introduces the concept of divine decrees. And all that means, that sounds like a churchy word, but all that means is that we obey because God said so. That's it. A divine decree. There's no, we don't need a reason. He says it, so we do it. He said it, he's our one, so we do it. He commands, we obey. So that's part of the last thing. That's part of the theology. We'll get a little bit more into that. So those are the 3. That's kind of what this whole document's about. But why does it matter? That's really what we're asking, right? That was easy. That was easy to talk about why it happened. It's easy to talk about the context. It's easy to talk about all of these things, all the reasons, the separateness, the whatever. But what we're really asking is, what does it matter, right? It's this bigger why is, why do I care? Why do I care? So that's where we're going to sit in for the rest of the night. And let's start with a few things about us, okay? We like to do things our own way, don't we? We like control. We don't like to be told what to do. We get bored easily. We tend to make everything less formal. We increasingly pay less and less and less attention to anything and everything. And we take so much for granted, don't we? That's about us. There is a threshold. The idea is that there's a threshold between the sacred and the common. And the best way to picture this is 2 rooms with a space in between. That's the threshold, right? And another way to say common is profane. They would say that back in the day if you've ever come across that word. I often will suggest that we take everything that we do into the sacred space, the sacred realm. And I say, the way that I say that is by saying everything's spiritual, okay? We make every part of life a spiritual act. And in doing that, we make everything sacred. But as people, we tend to do the opposite of that. We make sex casual, and we make sex about consumption, and that's the best way to see what that is. It's pornography, right? We take this thing that belongs in the sacred room, and we take it out for everybody. Okay. The other way we do it is with food, and the best example of that is, I don't know if you've ever heard of something called mukbang. On your, when we're done here, you can, but I would suggest you not do it. I'm just describing it. It isn't prescriptive. If mukbang is a whole genre of videos on YouTube where people just eat all the food they can. Like they just point the camera at them and they just eat all the food as fast as they can. And so we take the sacred blessing of our food and we make it about mukbang and gluttony. Right? These are just a couple examples where we take the sacred and we make them common. And we take them for granted. And then the blessing gets lost, and it's just another thing, right? These biblical details and instructions, I would suggest, are not and have never been about the actual physical structures that they were building. They're not about the tabernacle. They're not about the temple. They're not about curtains and clothes, and they're not about the sacrifices. They are about how we relate to God. That's it. And that goes right back to in Hosea 6:6, God says, I don't want your sacrifice. This is still in the Old Testament when the sacrifices were what he's just gone through the whole thing of demanding. Here, I need these sacrifices, these festivals, and then later on he says, I don't want them at all. I want your heart. They're not about the thing at all. They're about how we come to him. They're about how we see our lives. They're about how we see God, how we see ourselves, how we see our neighbors. Every blessing, they're about life. They're about complete all of life and how we see everything and everything fitting together. Right? These all teach attention, respect, and reverence for the authority, the person of God. Right? It's a movement. The whole thing is a movement away from idolatry. It's away from this whole idea of the gospel of me. And how often do we hear things like, I don't want to do it like that. It's too hard. It's too complicated. What's the big deal? I'll just do it my way. Right? And these detailed instructions don't allow us to become casual about God or sacred things if we follow them, right? In this world that they came into, many religions were really localized and improvisational. They just did whatever they wanted, and that was the idea, do what you want. And when I say that, if you're not smiling a little bit, because you know that I'm going to say, of course, that was such an ancient way of thinking. These people, gosh, thank goodness that was then. And it's really, really hard to find a modern parallel for that kind of thinking, isn't it? Where we just take cafeteria style. We just take what we want. We do what we want. We make faith fit us. Right? So try and stretch your mind to a time where that might have been true. These passages insist on careful obedience. It's not my way. It's not your way. There is a right way, and that right way is his way. Now let's take a break. When I tell the boys to pick up their rooms, okay, what I have to say, if I just say, go pick up your room, that doesn't go well. And if anybody's ever had a kid or been a kid, you know exactly what I'm talking about. You have to say, I need you to pick up your clothes. I need you to pick up your dirty clothes. I need you to pick up all the dirty clothes. I need you to pick up the shirts, the socks, the pants. I need you to put those in the basket. And then the clean clothes, I want you to put those in the drawers that they go into, right? You know what I'm talking about. You have to be unbelievably detailed with them, right? And you can't just say, hey, clean up the kitchen, right? You have to say, all right, I want you to rinse the dirty dishes. I want you to then put those dirty dishes into the dishwasher. I want you to wipe down the counter. You have to be super detailed with it. And it's the same thing. It's the same thing. This kind of obsessive detail that we all truly understand. We all totally understand it because we've all done it at some point, right? How many times do you have to ask 1,000 questions because we're always looking for a way out? Did you do this? Did you do this? You have to get through. We have to be cornered almost. This kind of obsessive detail and obedience requires attentiveness. It requires focus. And it requires us to choose to put someone else, and I spell someone with a capital O, someone else, and his commands and his instructions above myself. Okay, so that's kind of what we're looking at. Here's a trivial example of that. Van Halen was a hair band, not a rock and roll band. I won't call them a hair band. Let's not do. They just had a lot of hair. So Van Halen was a band, and they had what's called a rider. And what that meant was when they were coming to town, they were coming to your town, and they'd send a list of demands that they had. And that was called a rider. And, it was what kind of food they wanted or what kind of light they needed or materials they might need. And in that rider, very, very famously, there was to be a bowl of M&Ms on the table, and there were going to be no brown ones in it. Okay? And that was, forever misunderstood, and it became a big joke about Van Halen, about like diva behavior and things like that. But it was never the brown M&Ms that mattered. It was because everything else mattered. Okay, they needed to put on this kind of show, and they needed it to be safe. And if you couldn't read their whole rider, they couldn't trust you for anything else. Right? It wasn't just the brown M&Ms. It was about safety measures. It was about lighting. It was about integrity. Okay? That makes sense? And here's the next example of the same kind of thing. The repetition of the phrase, "and the Lord commanded Moses," emphasizes the faithfulness. He just kept doing the thing as the Lord commanded. Right? He just kept reading the rider and doing the things because it was in the rider. That's it. It was divine decree. He did it exactly as it was commanded because, and only because, God commanded it. Okay, that makes sense a little bit? Here's another thing about us. Chaos is frightening, right? How many of us really, really like not knowing what's going to happen? Or what to do, right? How many of us are like, oh, this is great. I don't have any idea what to do, right? None of us. There's this modern problem which is called the paradox of choice, and a guy named Barry Schwartz made it in a TED Talk. And the idea behind this paradox of choice is an excessive number of options can lead to decreased satisfaction, increased anxiety, and ultimately inaction. And if that doesn't make sense, like there's a bunch of words there happening, think about your TV, right? When you had 13 channels, when I was young, I had 13 channels. Now, when I was very young, I think I had 3 channels, but I don't remember that too much. I remember having 13 on a dial that went like around like that, okay? And there was always something to watch. I never had trouble finding anything to watch. Now, I have unlimited options. I have every show that's ever been made on a streaming device, on anything that I want to find. And I can't tell you how many times I just sit there and scroll and try and find something. And then at the end, I'm like, nothing on. I just got rid of my cable because there's nothing on. I had, 200 channels, and there's nothing on. I can't decide. Right? We just can't decide. There's too much. So, build me a house. Build me a house. Well, how? How? What do you want it to look like? What should I use? How big? What color? Who's going to decide these things, right? If I told you build me a house, you'd have to really, really know me. And you might probably get a lot of it wrong. It probably wouldn't at all be what I think it should look like. Now, how much more important is the house of God? And if God just says, hey, I need a house, can you imagine? It would never get built. It would never, ever get built. Because everybody would start arguing. Who are you to tell me that the curtain's supposed to be purple? I think it should be orange. Well, I think that the curtain should be made of silk. Or I think it should be made of this. And I think the blood should go on the left big toe. I think right. Who would even think those things? So what would happen would be it would just grind to a standstill. Precision, and detail create stability. Order in ritual can give meaning. Highly structured worship can function as a kind of antidote to disorder. And when I say that, I mean personal, I mean societal. There is a comfort in knowing what you're going to get, what you're going to be expected to do, to say. There's a comfort in knowing, right? It's a kind of antidote to stress and the anxiety of the unknown. Here's the thing, when you come into church on Sunday morning at the Bridge, you're going to come in and you're going to see me and I'm going to give you hopefully you're surprised and challenged by the things that we talk about in the message. But you know it's going to be comfortable. You know it's going to be warm. You know I'm not going to have you get up and run around the building or do anything really nutty or anything like that. You know that. So you can come in and you can kind of relax from all the stress and anxiety and unknown that cause so much tension in our regular lives. Now, of course, the standardization and the tremendous detail and repetition can absolutely feel impersonal. It can feel stuffy, and it can lead to that checklist mentality and an absent heart, right? Above, I just said ritual order gives meaning. It can also suck the meaning right out of all spirituality. Of course it can. It can create a strict control, right? A control by the institutional authorities, by the people in charge, right? It can totally, you can see it. And that has been a real problem historically in the church, okay? With some people at the top using this ritual order to squash other people. Right? It's been used for that, to hit people with too. Order and organization can and often does lead to status, can lead to power, can lead to money, right? All of these concerns, all of these corruptions. Of course it can. It can. But it doesn't have to. See, lots of things can. And you know what else can suck the meaning right out of spirituality? Treating it like it's no big deal. Treating God like he's no big deal. Like it doesn't matter what we do or what we say or how we come to the table. Like wearing jeans to church instead of a suit can bring a less meaningful environment, but it doesn't have to. Right? We can say that about anything. Okay, so we keep coming back to this same question, okay, when we start to talk like that. How do we show up? How do we give our first fruits? Are we giving our first fruits or just what's left? Right? Hi, Kathy. And what's our heart posture? And what does our soil look like? Right? That's what we come back to. And that's how we prevent having meaning sucked out by any of these things. God isn't vague, isn't abstract, isn't random. God is careful, concrete, and particular. He is a God of order over chaos. This is a major biblical theme all through the Bible. And what that means is that holiness involves structure and attention, not improvisation, apathy, or just that whatever mindset. Come on, whatever. What doesn't make a difference. Precision reflects an intentional design. Okay, that's a big one. And worship shapes people through discipline, through practice, and it transforms us. Um, if we only worshiped when we felt like it, if we only loved our spouses when we felt like it, if we only went to work or to the gym when we felt like it, um, nobody eats a salad because they want a salad. Nobody ever does that ever. But the discipline and the practice of showing up every day, all the time, leads to this worship, leads to this increased depth of relationship. If God works through history, right, through history, rather than around it, okay, if God is in all of this, like, we talk about the logos, like a bee's honey through everything. And seriously, wouldn't you expect his character? And his character is order, organization, consistency, stability. Wouldn't you expect that all through it? Does a God of the order of the kind of God that sets up the universe, that makes you and me, seem like the kind of God that goes, well, let's just see, right? No. So wouldn't you expect his fingerprints all through it? All through, since they're all over you, it will be all through creation, all through everything, right? So back to the initial thing about us. If chaos is frightening, and if precision creates stability, if ritual order gives meaning, if highly structured worship can function as an antidote to disorder, don't these books, these chapters, these instructions start to look an awful lot like love and care for us? If the things that cause us distress, if the things that cause us anxiety and are taking us apart, God is addressing those right in the beginning and giving us a way to deal with those things, a way around them. Avoid this. Here, take this. And then you don't have to mess around with that. Precision communicates. Okay, now we're coming back into this. We're going to really bring this home. Precision communicates, you matter enough for me to pay attention. Let's take it back to your kids. Clean your room, right? They clean their room because it matters enough to pay attention. You do these things because you matter enough to pay a great deal of attention. The God who numbers the curtains and the cubits and all of that is the God who numbers the hairs on your head. If God cared about acacia wood and gold clasps, he cares about your mortgage, he cares about your diagnosis, he cares about your calendar, and he cares about your kitchen table. In chaotic cultures, and we are sure in one, right? Structure feels restrictive at first until you realize it protects. Okay? It's like guardrails on a mountain road, right? It's like surgical protocols or checklists on an airplane. Are you ever mad at those? Would you ever even think for a second that they're unloving? We have a couple people going through surgeries. If there wasn't a protocol for what kind of equipment they'd need, how to clean them, how to take care of it, if there weren't all these people around and all of these really, really specific environments, then who knows what could happen, right? God is creating a safe pathway for broken people to approach him. That's what this is. That's what this is. Remember, we broke it. We broke it and we were never coming back. And then God created a pathway back and said, here, do it like this. And you can come back. Now, it turns out we couldn't. And he always had something else in mind anyway. Right? But he needed to show us this to make the clicks all along the way so that we could get to grace. Detail says there's a way back. And speaking of that way back, the gospel, Jesus Christ, life, death, and resurrection provide. And as a matter of fact, they are the way back. Okay? Let's never get confused about that. These chapters are structured theology in architectural form. Isn't that cool? Isn't that a cool way to say that? How often have you heard me say that we find the gospel? We find God, we find redemption, we find God's voice, God's hands, God working everywhere. We find grace, mercy everywhere and anywhere. We find it in business, we find it in movies, we find it in songs, nature, and in each other, and the tabernacle curtains. The gospel is coming through all of these things, and it's just cracking all around us if we only open our eyes to see it, right? If God repeats as the Lord commanded Moses dozens of times, it's because obedience isn't about anxiety, it's about trust. It's about consistency and trust. Repetition says, this is reliable. This isn't going to change tomorrow. The covenant, salvation, the gospel, Jesus Christ is stable and it's a rock you can build your life upon. In an age of constant flux, which feels like sand under our feet, everything's moving, it's a world with no anchors, stability itself is care, isn't it? And here's the thing, ask a child with no structure in the home. Go to any teacher in any school and say, how do kids do with structure? We are crying out for some kind of structure because it means safety, right? These chapters is what care looks like when it becomes concrete. And think about the peace involved in what I'm about to say. God is not improvising creation. He's not improvising his house, and he's not improvising your life. See, we think meaning is found in peak experiences, in intensity, right? This is a countercultural message that we're finding in Exodus and Leviticus, and it's saying that meaning is found in repetition, structure, intention, attention. God is teaching his people how to live when nothing dramatic is happening. In these weddings I do sometimes, I say, what do we do when the excitement of the wedding and the reception is past? Right? What do we do when all of this, everything for a wedding, all this buildup for the wedding becomes real life? When the wedding becomes a marriage? Because most of life isn't dramatic. It's every day. It's the dishes, it's taking the trash out, and it's making dinner. Leviticus is all of these chapters, but really it's about what we do. Okay? So, let's kind of think about this a different way. There's a lot of information in this message. I totally get it. And part of the reason that we did it on YouTube is because if it was going to be a Sunday morning, it's going to be long. Okay, here you can turn it off, and you can come back later. You can watch it in segments, and you can do all that kind of thing. But when you hear all this, it speaks to a study. It speaks to reference. It speaks to guidance. It speaks to the prayer that I've done. It speaks to my attention to this. It speaks to intention of what I'm trying to say and all that, right? This much detail and preparation mostly really show I care about you, right? And I respect your time. I respect you and I respect your time. And when we come here, I didn't want to keep you for an hour and a half on a Sunday morning. That's why. Anytime anybody is going to come share at the bridge or anything like that on a Sunday morning, one of the things I say all the time is that everybody that goes there is sharing their most precious resource, which is time. So be respectful of that. Treat it with care. Order, preparation, and organization shows that, doesn't it? If I just stood up and said, well, we'll see, We'll see what we're going to talk about. I don't really know what we're going to talk about. Let me just start talking and see if I find it. And just start to improvise it. What would that show you? What would that show you? We went to early on. Angel and I went to a church in her hometown, and that church, a kid stood up, and I say kid, he was a little younger than us, but he was fresh out of seminary, and he got up, and his first sentence was, "I don't really know what we're going to talk about. I'm just going to let the Spirit lead." And he spoke for over an hour, and as soon as it was over, none of us had any idea what the point was. We had no idea. We felt taken advantage of. Well, I say we, the two of us certainly did. The two of us. He didn't really care about our time enough to put the order in. Okay, to put the preparation, to put his time into to care. That care just wasn't there. See, it's a lot like how the genealogies communicate a care for the individual people and their stories. This communicates a God that cares for each of us. These details communicate a God with such great care for the sacredness of our practice and the ins and outs of our lives. I say all the time, everything matters because it does to him and it should to us. Right? Van Halen and these brown M&Ms matter because everything does. Right? How we take care of ourselves, how we drive, how we pray, if we pay our bills or get to work on time, what's happening in your house as you listen to all of this? All of these things matter. Everything's spiritual. Everything's spiritual. And it's how we organize our lives. Okay? And the more we see and understand his care and why we have everything and anything, the more it will matter to us. The more everything will matter to us. Somebody just wrote on this thing, get some wax for that beautiful dome. Shine that bad boy up. Maybe I will. Maybe I will. So let's remember the first question. Okay, we're almost done. See, that's why you turn the comments off. So the first thing, remember the first question. Is it overwhelming and obsessive? In a culture that has very little patience and commitment and a lack of focus and attention, probably it is. But the question is that a good thing? Is the way we are and the way we've become a good thing? Right? So, is it boring? Maybe. Is it irrelevant? No way. No way. Just like the Bible in a year provides a framework for our growth. Now, it has to be said, yes, of course, it can be mindless. It can be checking boxes. It can mean open up the thing and barely skim over it till you get through the day. Of course it can. Or, depending on the heart we bring, its attention, its intention, and man, here it comes. Here it comes. This is the most important part. It is the decision to bring and to give the best parts of us. This is a precursor, really, to Romans 12, which says present your bodies and present your minds and your souls as a living sacrifice. That's what this is all pointing us to. These details, these practices, these structures prepare our hearts. They enforce a posture of great value towards God, and they can provide the perfect ground and pathway for transformation. That's what's happening here. It is saying, do things this way and bring the best of you. Over and over in Leviticus, you're hearing, bring a perfect, an unblemished animal. Bring the best you have. Because it all matters. All of it. How you come, what you wear, your heart posture. And then we can take that and put it in every area of life. How you show up with your children, with your coworkers, with your boss, with the cashier on the road. How you come communicates what you feel about the God of the universe and yourself. It's all related and it all matters. And Leviticus, more than maybe any other book, is in the detail is saying that stuff that you do, it matters a lot. It matters a lot because it's saying who you are, and it's saying what you believe about the God of the universe and your place in this entire story. That's what Leviticus says to me. And when it goes through the whole rest of my life, probably, okay, I have a little bit of facial. I shave every Saturday night or Sunday morning. I shave every Saturday or Sunday for church. And I do that partially because of Leviticus. I do it because every single thing matters. Every single thing I do matters. And I think about Leviticus all the time. All the time, because there are days when you just don't want to do it. There are days you didn't. When I was working at the weight room, I would see some kids and maybe one kid would come in and you'd think, this doesn't mean anything. I can just zone out, or I can be a grouch, or I can do, but that kid, to that kid it matters. To that kid it matters a lot, and it matters how I conduct myself, even if that kid doesn't care at all, because of Leviticus. Right? It matters how we build the curtains because it matters what God's house looks like. And it has to be said, now what's God's house? You know, back then it was a tabernacle, and then it became a temple, and now the temple of God is within you. You're the temple of God. It matters. It matters a lot. So, last thing. We can absolutely... My head does not look like a boiled egg. It just doesn't, and I don't know what to tell you. People that are commenting, it doesn't look like an egg. It's a little bit oval, of course, but man, anyway, we can skim the words. I'm not going to tell you that you have to read every name in the Bible and that you have to know how many cubits and how much things weigh and what measures are on these things. We can skim that. But please, 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 please don't ever skim or underestimate the love and care of God, of the God that wrote them, has for us. Don't ever, ever underestimate that. You can skim these words, of course. But don't miss it. Don't miss what's happening here. That's it. Thank you very much for tuning in and spending this hour with me. It's super fun to do things like this. It's really super fun, and it is fun to read the comments, and I appreciate anybody that spends any amount of time in any kind of spiritual practice. It's pretty cool. So have a great night, and we have a bunch of things going on this week at the Bridge. We have Dave's talk on Saturday, and then we're back in Ecclesiastes on Sunday. So have a great night, everybody. I'm going to try and find the place to say good night and turn this off, and I can't find it. How embarrassing. Okay. Have a good night, everybody.